I'm the Chief Exec of Libraries Connected, so I'm very pleased to welcome you to this quite exciting webinar, really. I was just reflecting on the fact that, you know, in recent years, I think some budgets have kind of come and gone without too much of a flurry, but this one certainly seems to be a massive flurry around it. It seems, you know, it was long awaited, lots of speculation, and now there's a lot of political fighting around it. Yeah, it's quite interesting how controversial it is. But we're not doing any of the controversy. We're not going into the politics of it today. What we want to do is just have a quite clear-headed and calm look at the implications of the budget, especially on local government finances, which obviously have an enormous impact on library finances and any other areas that might directly affect libraries' work. So I'm very pleased today that we've got Ian Leet from LGA, and thanks, Ian. I think a lot of the content from the LGA analysis has gone into the slides. So I know you've all must have been working like crazy over the past, probably over the weekend as well, to generate that analysis at top speed. And then the other speaker is Emma Hodinott, who is our new Policy, External Affairs and Research Director. And I think, Emma, you certainly joined us at the right moment. There's been plenty of stuff on the policy front for you to get your teeth into since you started in September. So Emma, over to you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. So I've got a short presentation to take you through today. So I'm going to try and share my window. I will take you through that, and then Ian and I in particular are open to any questions, any feedback. We're also keen to hear your experiences and thoughts as well going forward. So I will try and share my screen. It goes blank for a minute. There we go. So this is about understanding the budget, and we're going to focus on obviously the budget that's just happened from national government, but it would be remiss of us not to touch on some of the other things that are happening with council finances at this moment in time. So I'm going to touch on the Fair Funding Review, devolution and local government reorganisation. All are having big effects on council finances, council organisation, and we're going to look at it as a round. But first off, we're going to concentrate first on the budget. And just to explain, I guess, the national budget context, as Isabel said, we're not going to get into the politics of that. Everybody else is arguing about that on our tellies. This is taking you through, I guess, what it's about, what's actually been put into that budget and what it might mean for us within the sector as well. So the budget, the national budget, covers taxes, but it also sets out public spending as well. And going into that, the Chancellor had set out a number of rules, her fiscal rules, about how she would manage that budget. There was also some commitments around tax in the manifesto during the general election last year as well. There is something called the Office of Budget Responsibility that you've probably heard about in the news, that checks her figures, checks her budget independently, but it also forecasts what is going to happen with the economy as well over the next so many years. So the rationale given in the budget was that she had to find more money from taxes to follow her rules. And what we've seen going through this budget, and means there's quite a lot of slides, unfortunately, today, is that there's lots of smaller tax rises rather than one big one. So there's not a lot of sort of big moves in the national budget and taxes, but there are lots and lots of small changes all going on. And I think it remains to be seen sort of the cumulative effect of what those might look like. So this is the LGA response, which I think is really helpful in giving those headlines about what does this budget mean for us within local government terms. So we've seen funding levels increase slightly into local government. However, this budget does not give us a huge increase in funding. that is needed. And just to quote some of the figures, the LGA expect there to be an 8.4 billion gap in local government funding over the next few years. And to give a sense of scale of that, that's the culture budget of councils 4 times over. So we're still seeing a big gap in the funding that is needed. Also worth highlighting in that budget as well, there is the announcement of a 0.5% reduction in department budgets in 2028. So that means it doesn't necessarily translate into cuts to local government, but the department that local government sits within will see a reduction in its spending. And it might not sound a lot, but 0.5% is a significant, and previous cuts like that have translated into local government cuts as well. So I think there is concern as well about this projection of cuts in 2028 to the national departmental budgets. As I said, there's lots of things going in that budget, and we're going to kind of run through some of these in a bit more detail, particularly where they have an impact. But we had the changes to SEND, which is the budget for children with special educational needs and disabilities. There's some changes on how that's dealt with. The 2-child limit on benefits is removed. More support around energy bills, changes to the minimum wage, changes to business rates, online gambling taxes are being introduced, and then also you'll have heard about the income tax threshold, which will be frozen, which will have implications for people as well. So I will touch on those in terms of how that relates to a lot of announcements in the rest of the digest. One of the things that you will have picked up in particular is the announcements around reading and books as we go into the National Year of Reading. And I just wanted to, I guess, give an update on what's happened to those announcements and what we're likely to see from that. So to go back to September, there was an announcement that there would be £10 million to create a library space for every primary school that didn't have one. By the end of this Parliament, this was part of the responding to the Libraries for Primaries campaign. So £10 million has been identified with that. What we don't know at this moment in time is the timeframes for that, how people can bid for that, how it's going to be delivered. That is all still being worked up by the National Lottery Community Fund at this moment in time. And then this last week just gone, books for secondaries were announced. So that was £5 million for books for secondary schools. So some funding, but not a huge amount. That equates to £1.36 per pupil for book supplies in secondary schools. And within all of that, as we know, this is around books and spaces. There isn't anything sort of coming back about how this is provided in terms of staffing and support and library services with regards to. So what does this mean for libraries? So going back to the headlines from the LGA, there are no big changes in local government finance. However, and I'll touch on this in a bit, how that sort of pie is cut up is changing through the fair funding review. So even though there's the same amount, roughly the same amount of money, how it's being distributed between councils is changing, and could mean some changes for your local authority. As I said, there are further cuts to government funding are penciled in for 2028. We also know there's some significant policy decisions in that budget. So they're changing how they account for the special educational needs budget, with sort of the deficit being covered by government rather than local authorities. There was changes around social rents, so council house rent basically, but also how an asylum accommodation is dealt with as well. All of those big announcements, which are currently pressures or big parts of council budgets, are subject to further consultation or future announcements. So there's some big question marks there, and some of those will affect different councils in different The other thing that will directly impact services is the national living wage is increasing, but we also saw significant increases for 16 to 20-year olds as well. Currently, they're paid much lower rates. They are seeing big increases there in the national minimum wage for younger workers and also apprentices as well. So, is there anything positive in there? Well, there was a few things and a few opportunities really for our services that were announced, and the kind of things to watch as well. I'll touch a little bit more on the devolution, but we saw a lot of money going into mayoral areas, particularly in the north of England as well, with a focus on local priorities and skills and things like digital skills as well. There was some youth unemployment as well in the budget, and the introduction of something called a youth guarantee, which is giving young people a placement if they've been on benefits, I think, for 18 months. So that is a commitment to tackle some of the high instances of youth unemployment. There was £18 million for new playgrounds. There was the renewed commitment to the NHS app that I know we support a lot of people with, but also 250 new neighbourhood health centres, and looking at co-location of those as well. Other things that may be of interest is the High Street Task Force, which is looking at illegal businesses on the high street, and we know lots of libraries are situated on the high streets, and tackling some of those illegal businesses and money laundering that's happening. And there's also something called the Office of the Impact Economy as well, which is a body looking at how it brings in, I guess, philanthropy into the public sector as well. So we'll be watching with interest about how that develops as well. So I think things for us to consider and to sort of take forward, there is an emphasis on house building from this government, an emphasis on new homes. There is currently a consultation on the new towns as well, and there's really a question of provisions of libraries for new settlements, and how we respond to that. And also the funding for that is an important question. I think there's also something around mayoral funding as well. And again, probably more questions than there are answers at this moment in time. But from the budget, I've highlighted there some of the big figures that are going into those mayoral regions. And as you can see, that is a lot of money going into those areas. What we don't know is what strings are attached, how much freedom they've got around that funding. That's all yet to be worked out. I think the one thing to note is this mayoral funding is not seen as a direct replacement of the UK SPF funding. So to explain what that is, you may remember when we were part of the EU, we used to get European funding. The government then created something called the UK SPF, which continued to fund those sort of programmes. So if you are delivering some of those programmes locally, that funding is coming to an end, and there isn't a direct replacement for that going forward. So they're the sort of, I guess, the impact on councils, on the library services, just in terms of sort of day-to-day and how staff will see that impact on library users. Again, lots and lots of small changes that will have impacts on people on that very local level. So there is going to be a new warms home strategy. They're taking levies off energy bills to try and bring down those prices. The winter fuel payment is back for around 75% of pensioners, and most of those will get it automatically, but some may still have to apply, and there is a deadline, I think, of March next year to apply for that as well. And in terms of pensioners, the triple lock also remains, so they will see extra funding. They predict around £575 from April next year as well. You'll have heard a lot about the 2-child limit on benefits. So before, you could only get benefits for your first 2 children. You couldn't get them for subsequent children. So this is going to benefit about 17% of low-income families who have more than 2 children. They will now start to see benefits for those further children. But one thing to note is that the benefit cap still applies. So there is still an overall limit on the amount of benefits that one family can receive. So even though some people might see the 2-child limit taken away, they still won't feel the benefit because there is still that other cap there. Also, people on very low incomes, many of them will start to pay tax for the first time, as the thresholds for income tax will stay the same till 2031, and wages will grow, so more people will be taken into the tax system. Local housing allowances haven't increased either, in terms of the money people receive for housing help. Prescription fees and rail fares are frozen. Universal credit, there wasn't a small increase, but again, there are some changes coming with benefits as well. So you might have heard about the mobility car scheme, but we know there is some kind of review around personal independence allowance coming. What that looks like remains to be seen. So as you can see, lots and lots of changes that are going to impact on different groups of people, and sort of changes really in their current circumstances. So hopefully that gives you a whistle-stop tour of what happened in the budget. You know, some of the key from that and how that's going to impact on. So I just want to, for the last few slides, I guess, concentrate on some of the other things that are happening that are going to affect local government finance, and obviously finance for services as well. One of the important ones is the fair funding formula. So this has been a long time coming. You may have heard about it before. But over the last year, the government has been consulting on how it changes government finance to make it based more on need. But also, I guess, the what they call the council tax base as well, the ability of local people to pay their council tax, and what that looks like. And it was designed to make it fairer, as it says. So the ability for people to pay and need tend to be sort of big issues, particularly for councils who do have high need, but also have a low council tax base as well. They don't have the big properties to kind of raise funds through their council tax as well to pay for that extra need, is how I'm trying to describe it. So they've gone through that process though. They've released the outcomes of that, and these changes are going to be implemented from next year. They're also going to try and make it a lot simpler for local government as well, and they're going to give us, hopefully, the budget, multi-year budgets, so councils don't have to just go from one year to the next. They can actually see how much funding they're going to get over a number of years as well. So as a result of this, some councils will see their incomes fall. Some will see them rise, but some will see their incomes fall. And there are some transitional arrangements in place as well. We're due to, though there are some information out there, councils aren't due to get their sort of what they call their provisional statement, sort of the first cut of that, till this month. But I think it's really important to be aware of that, and the fact that it will hit different kinds of councils, sort of urban, rural, north, south, in very different ways, with regards to how much funding they get, what slice of the pie they get, and how much they will be expected to raise through council tax as well. If that wasn't enough, we also have local government reorganisation going on. This was referred to in the budget as well. I've put the quote up there, but it's well underway. A lot of you are already down the path of that. The main thing happening is the abolishing of district councils, but there's mergers, separations, all sorts going on. It's happening in lots of different ways in different parts of the country. And I'm really pleased that we have been working with the Local Government Association and the National Archives to produce some guidance to help you with that. And the first iteration of that is available now. Before we officially launch it, if you follow that URL, you will get to that. But again, that is going to have impact on budgets and structures as well coming up. And finally, I guess how we can support you, but also how you can help us make the case for libraries within all of that taking place as well. So I've put 4 sort of key things that are happening at the moment that really help us collectively put together the case for libraries amidst all these sort of funding decisions and reorganisation that's going on. So the first one is to submit your annual location activity data to Arts Council England. That information is really important because it's what the government then goes on to base decisions on. It's used in various ways. It's really important that that data is there, that we inform government about what we are doing, the scale of what we're doing. So putting in that information timely and accurately really helps us build the picture and helps us make the case about libraries as well. You know that we do our regular surveys and taking part in those really helps us gather information from your services, again, to feedback. And there's currently a survey on the Education Committee inquiry that's been done in Parliament about reading for pleasure. And we really want to shout out about the amazing things that libraries are doing and really put our case forward. So please do take part in those surveys. That information is always collated and used to make the case for libraries. We do have an advocacy guide as well, which is helping you to put the case for libraries locally and within your local council as well. And as mentioned, we have our new guide on local government reorganisation. It's in its first iteration. There are case studies and other things being developed for that as well, but we're there to help you through that process as well. So that brings me through to the end of a very whistle-stop tour of the budget. Ian, is there anything that you want to add from your perspective, from your point of view, from the LGA?
Thank you, Emma. I mean, that was a really good, comprehensive presentation. Although it's a contentious budget, I think from a local government perspective, it's largely standstill at the moment in terms of financial position. But obviously, it's a lot of the policy changes that are going forward in terms of reorganisation, the integrated budgets for the combined authorities, and thinking through what that devolution bill is going to mean for libraries. I think there's a lot of potential opportunity there in terms of how you position your services to explain some of the new opportunities for your residents, particularly around that 2-child cap, but also the skills funding and accessing those services that becomes available. So lots of opportunities there, and also to sort of position your services really as the face of the new council as you go into reorganisation, so that actually you're at the forefront of people's minds as they start thinking about the opportunities for the new service. So lots of opportunities there. Not the end to austerity, sadly, that's still playing out, but perhaps a slight easing on the immediate pressures to cut budgets in many local authorities.
Thanks, Ian, and hopefully that overview is I guess helpful for you in sort of that planning. We've got a bit of time, so we're happy to take any questions or comments or feedback really about your own what's happening in your own area as well. So Emma, I don't know what the best way of people doing that is, whether people want to put things in the chat or whether they put their hands up as well.
They can, yes. So either way works, and I can spotlight people if they have a question that they want to ask verbally.
Are there any questions or comments or any feedback? No, I think we've stunned everybody into silence with regards to that. I think for me there is a lot happening at the moment, and hopefully that's kind of given a bit of a framework for what is happening, and unfortunately lots of change coming. But Isabel's going to start us off then with a question.
Yeah, it might be too early for this, but I think I'm right that the last time when national insurance went up, most library services were slightly insulated from that, apart from those who were in trusts or contracted services. And then some of the large spun out services, then that rise in national insurance and minimum wage had a really big impact. So is there any sense this time whether those rises in staff costs, whether libraries will be slightly insulated from them, or is it likely that they'll be looking at thinking, oh, I've got to find an extra however much to pay my staff?
So I think last time there was dedicated provision to support councils to offset some of those costs for their direct services, some of which they could pass on, but largely as it was an underestimate of what it was going to cost them. I'm not sure that happened in practice. This time there is no additional support, so it will have to be borne within staff budgets. So there will have to be an assessment of how significant that is for each individual service.
The other thing to add for services is those changes in the national living wage, but also significant changes to the national minimum wage. And you'll have probably seen there's quite a debate about whether that helps or harms younger people in terms of getting into the workforce. There's some quite significant, if you do employ people under 20 or you have apprenticeships, they are quite significant increases in their hourly rate, and that will have budget implications going forward.
Our workforce team has been raising with government that we previously tried to keep the lowest local government spine points ahead of the minimum wage, and the minimum wage, but there is now very little difference between them. Of course, we have a recruitment issue across all elements of local government, so that is something that we're discussing with ministers, trying to keep local government an attractive place to work.
While you're here, Ian, the one area I did want to ask about, because it looks like, I guess there's more to come, is around business rates, and obviously that will affect in-house library services different to those that operate externally, quite significantly. But there was kind of talk in the budget about reform, revaluation, and changes to relief. I don't know whether you just want to touch on those, because that's likely to be another significant cost for library services.
Yeah, there is a whole suite of reforms being proposed for business rates. I think the proposals are probably greater than ambition for actual change. So at the moment, it's working through which ones will actually become implemented and likely to impact. Certainly, it is likely that councils will retain more of their business rates, so that's potentially a small funding boost, whether or not that's connected directly to economic growth services. Of course, business and intellectual property centres could qualify under that. But in terms of the individual premises themselves, it's quite hard to work out what the implications are. I think we're very keen to receive feedback from services about the expected impact and able to feed that into national conversations about how we fund local government overall.
Thank you. Yeah, some key areas in terms of staffing, buildings, that are going to impact on services directly. If there aren't any other questions, I'll bring it to a close and let everybody enjoy a bit of lunchtime. And just to follow up, there's some questions about the presentations. So we will them out afterwards. Not a problem. So people can have a look through those, have a look at the links as well for further information. And if there is anything specific, then you know where we are. We obviously will be, as we said, surveying going out to members as things develop and other consultations come up as well, to make sure that we're reflecting back the concerns, but also some of the opportunities for library services as well. Is there anything you'd like to add, Isabel, before we sign off?
Just thanks, Emily, and it's really useful to have this gallop through. I think there is a lot to take in. I think your slides set it out really well. I suppose we'll just feel like running on a slightly depressing note. Some of the measures may mean additional costs for libraries. But hopefully more will become clear on some of these issues over the next few weeks, and there'll be people in your councils able to help you if you're having to do budget projections on what these changes might mean.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.